Ain't no surprise I didn't get these scars from falling over in church. I told some lies, broke some laws and ties instead of good hard work. When I die, I'll take nothing that I took down in the dirt. Lord, I'll cry and I'll be avenged by all those eyes.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for joining today. A lot of crazy stuff going on right now in the world. We got the big 2024 election coming up, and my news cycle has been going crazy. I read the news like every single day, and it's just crazy to see how fast things change on a day-to-day basis. It's like we're pissed off about this on one side, we're pissed off about this on the other side, and it's completely forgotten a couple days later. But as I'm combing through some of these articles, I come across gold from time to time. And today I was reading through the articles, and the thing is, they'll try to sneak some like ads in there to you. And if you don't pay attention to the little marker, you don't pay attention to what the newspaper is that's actually putting out the article, and don't see the little ad thing, then maybe you get pulled away. So when I read this headline, I immediately thought, that's an ad. And I looked, and it wasn't an ad. And I was curious, but I decided not to click on it. But the headline was 12 Signs to Know That You're Unintelligent. And it piqued my interest. I kept going. And I finally decided to scroll back up and click on it. And, sign one was, if you're reading this article, you are unintelligent. And that it got me pretty good. It got me pretty good. Yeah. So I guess the reason I tell you that is you guys are about to listen to me talk about things that I am trying to educate you on. So just remember, I'm dumb. And for those who actually think that was a real story, it was a real article. I didn't end up going and clicking on it because I feared that the first thing on the 12 things would be, if you're reading this, you are unintelligent. So I didn't end up clicking it. Last week we talked a lot about like nutrition in general, just a very broad oversweep of what you need to know to get started. How many calories should you be eating? What is a calorie? Macronutrients. I think a lot of the time people focus on the calories being the most important thing. And from a clear math standpoint, obviously it is. In a laboratory setting, it's always going to come down to the math. But we don't live in laboratory settings, and we live in real life. And I just wanted to get that across to you guys, is understanding that just because you tried paleo or just because you tried keto and it didn't work for you doesn't mean it's bad, or it doesn't work for other people, or it can't work for someone. And for your specific lifestyle, it just may not have been the right thing, or for the time in your life. There have been times in my life where it has been very difficult to eat certain ways, and there are times where it is a lot easier. I can tell you that with having a stay-at-home job and even a gym in my house, it is difficult at times to make it all happen. So, you add in the chaos of a kid, you add in the chaos of work in general and relationships and all the other things that have to be done in life. And it's like sometimes you just want to throw a freaking pizza in the oven and eat that because it's easier. So all in all, understanding that your specific situation is going to be an indicator of a diet that might be best for you. It could have an impact on how well you perform in your diet or your goals within your diet. So I wanted to talk about a few different diets today, and some of this stuff is just going to be, I have a few notes here on like a few diets that are very similar because I want to talk about the distinctions really between them. So that you understand, but a lot of this stuff is just going to go from experience because I have tried almost all of these diets at one time or another just to collect information. I'm going to try it for a 6-week period, a 12-week period, whatever it is, and just see How did what is the subjective stuff? How did I feel? How did I perform mentally, physically? But then how did it actually perform in compared to other diets? Like for me specifically and to other people. So, with that all in mind, let's hop into the Mediterranean Paleo Whole30 area first. So the main thing that I'm grouping these all together is because they're all going to push towards a larger message. And this is a great message. I think that the marketing behind these products that are sold under these name tags are really just to sell money or sell products and make money, and that it's not actually anything that makes it a Mediterranean paleo or Whole30 thing, other than the fact that it's companies trying to lie to you and tell you these are whole foods, which they try to preach and push while making a product for you that is it's a product that is not a whole food for the most part. Anytime I see something that says like organic paleo and it's like a cupcake or a piece of bread or a tortilla, I'm like, that is as far from paleo as can be. Like, that is the most manipulated thing I've seen. The idea behind these diets is eating foods as close to the original source as possible. So if I'm wanting to eat chicken, the closest thing possible to that would be growing and raising chickens and killing them and slaughtering them and harvesting their meat myself. I know what I'm putting in their food for them to eat, so I know that they're healthy. I'm taking care of them. I'm eating their eggs, blah, 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 blah. Like, that is like direct contact with your food. One step away from that, I guess, would be buying it from someone. 2 steps away would be buying it from someone who bought it from someone in that manner. Or I guess, buying chickens that were already raised and then slaughtering them yourself. Like, what I'm trying to say is try to get it as close to the chicken as possible. Buy the whole chicken and break it down yourself, or buy just the raw meat taken out, not even frozen, but fresh meat. As long as these companies, and a lot of these companies are good companies, are following the chain of command and custody, they're going to be delivering fairly decent quality meat. Now, whether we want to talk about organic or inorganic, GMO meats and vegetables and fruits and things like that, like, I've done research on that and I have information on it. I might get into that some today, but in all reality, that's a whole nother podcast. What I will say on it is, nutritionally, from a macronutrient perspective, calories, fat, carbohydrates, protein, there is almost no difference between organic food and GMO food. The protein in a chicken breast per ounce on organic versus inorganic is the same. The fat, the carbohydrates. That is what I'm talking about. From a micronutrient perspective, all the niacin and the iron and the magnesium and all the things that our body gets from this, in addition to the amino acids necessary for building tissues and those proteins, all those micronutrients that are needed for muscle function and being able to move my hand like this, all the chemicals that were used in the nerve signals of doing this. Okay? Like, everything has a cost. And there is a difference, but I do want people to understand that it's not a significant enough difference in micronutrients for it to cost double. Now, does that mean that these companies should be making GMO foods? I'm not defending it, but I'm talking about, as of right now, from a nutritional standpoint only, there is very little difference between the quality of organic food versus inorganic food when you get it at its base level, from the plant, from the ground. What I mean is someone who grows a stalk of corn organically versus someone who grows one inorganically are going to get a very similar product, And that's mainly because hundreds, maybe thousands of years of human intervention on that crop, probably hundreds, considering that, America and all, they might have been using some form of that for thousands of years. But let's just talk here in America. The corn crop that we use, that we have manipulated to get a certain product that we want, in addition to genetically modifying the actual DNA of the corn seed to see more favorable outcomes. Even if you have 2 organic seeds and just choose to grow one inorganic and versus inorganic, you're going to get pretty similar corn. Okay? So what this comes down to is there a leaching effect of the chemicals? I believe that there are some very bad things that happen from some of these horrible chemicals, that pesticides specifically. Like, I don't think that there are a lot of people out there at their house when they're growing food that are dumping chemicals on their gardens. But that's also why we don't get as big of fruits and vegetables as a lot of these places, is they're dumping chemicals. And there is natural ways to do it through regenerative farming. But, the American mindset has to change. So what I'm saying is, currently, the way that our commercially grown organic and inorganic foods are not yielding significant differences in nutritional quality of meats, proteins, vegetables, fruits, legumes, berries, nuts, any of the main categories of organic versus inorganic. I'm going to leave it at that for now. All right. So as we get into Mediterranean Paleo Whole30, what I want you guys to understand is this is buying and eating foods as close to the original source. Don't buy Uncle Ben's instant rice that's already been cooked and processed and had things happen to it. Just buy whole long grain rice and cook it yourself. I'm not saying grow a rice paddy. I'm just saying try your best to get foods close to their original source. Maybe you don't want to make bread, so maybe just don't eat it. Maybe find something that you want to eat, or find a good brand of bread that is actually pretty healthy. Now, what I will tell you is that most of them aren't. And the reason most of them aren't is because there has to be some form of preservative, because the amount of time that it takes to get there. Look, from studying mushrooms and studying mycology and all the fungus stuff that comes with that, you inevitably get into learning about molds and bacteria, because you have to deal with a lot of contamination in that industry. Like, the same environment that thrives for a mushroom to grow is the same environment that thrives for a microorganism like a bacteria or a mold to grow as well. So they're everywhere. I can tell you that from experience. It is very hard to avoid getting contamination when you're trying to be involved in a mycology. Like when you're wanting to learn and like you're out foraging in the forest and you find one and you want to clone it. So you put it on a little plate, and next thing you know, it's got all kinds of bacteria growing on it. So you have to then isolate that. So what I'm saying is they have to fill these things, regardless of how healthy they tell you this bread is. It's got crap in it. So one thing I will say is there are brands, and there are so many people now that are making bread. There is a girl, I don't want to say girl, a woman at local here in Troy, actually a bunch of them, that make sourdough bread. And yeah, it might cost $10 to get a loaf of bread, but the quality of that bread is so much better. And what I generally tell people is, like, don't eat bread unless you're making a sandwich. Like, consider its carb source. Like, you can do other things. I like tortillas and wraps a lot better. Let's not get into that too much. Back to Mediterranean. What I'm saying is finding food sources as close to the original thing as possible. So what is it? It's essentially traditional foods to that area in the Mediterranean. What makes it a whole food diet is a lot of these people were just growing foods that naturally grew well in the soil, vegetables, legumes, fruits, nuts, seeds, and they lived in coastal towns. So they did a lot of seafood. They raised animals for their dairy. They raised chickens. They had lots of healthy fat sources from the nuts and the olives and things that grew on the trees there, as well as the fish and the fatty fish that were in the area. Lots of mackerel, herring, sardines, albacore. They did drink alcohol. I mean, alcohol has been part of that region forever. Some of these diets, zero alcohol is allowed on it. As far as Whole30, when you're looking at this, the Whole30 diet has a lot of those principles, but it focuses less on I don't want to say it focuses less on the fats, because the fats are very important in the Whole30, but I would say it's more of the high protein, high fat, whereas the Mediterranean is kind of like a nice even swath of all of them. You're going to have whole food carb sources, but at the same time, you're going to have a lot of fats in your diet, and your protein levels are probably going to be a little bit lower than they would normally be. Now with Whole30, it was designed to be a reset. So it was like, we're talking about eating all those same fields of foods in different quantities, but going back to a place of eliminating out things in order to reduce undesired effects happening from our food, or determine if the things that are ailing us are from the food. So it typically starts with like a traditional elimination diet, and then you start by adding back in different things. So in the particular diet that you begin to reintroduce by adding in fruits and vegetables, including potatoes. Then you can look at like seafood, unprocessed meats, nuts, eggs, and then back on out. They do have a banned food list. Like, you're not allowed to eat dairy. You're not allowed to eat grains, wheat, corn, rice, nothing with added sugar. They suggest that you stay away from chickpeas, lentils, and soy, no alcohol, no pasta or processed bread, and no fried food. So in all reality, I kind of think those are some pretty good rules to follow in general. Like, I don't necessarily think that rice is bad. I think that processed white rice is not the best for you. And there are studies that show that eating rice after it's been cooked fresh versus letting it sit in the fridge for 24 hours significantly affects the blood sugar impact that we have from eating rice. I think it was Paul Saladino. Was it Paul Saladino? If it was not Paul Saladino, I'm sorry for putting your name even in this podcast, because you're a great guy. I think you do good work. There was a study essentially on self-study that was like published in literally 24 hours. And this shows you that you don't have to be a doctor to do a study, because I did this same test at my house because I have a blood sugar checker and I was able to prick my finger. Now, this person in this video that I watched had a continuous glucose monitor, which is actually significantly better because it's giving you live reading of watching this happen rather than you just taking a snapshot of a period of time, which is what a glucose checker essentially does. So the test is easy, and you can perform this yourself at your house. You can cook some rice, take your blood sugar, eat the rice after you cook it, put the rest in the fridge, then check your glucose at 30 minutes, 60 minutes, 90 minutes, and 120 minutes. I would suggest doing 4 checks, just because that way you're at least getting some better data. And watch your blood sugar go up. And then the next day, I want you to do the exact same thing, but with the rice from the fridge. You can reheat the rice from the fridge, but do it. And you will notice that your blood sugar will rise less. And I forget what the actual thing is, but there's something that has to do with some protein or something in the rice that causes a larger response, and that kind of disappears. That protein, I guess, breaks down or something after it cooks within 24 hours or when it cools, and yeah, it's gone. So that's it for that. Paleo. What I tell people is the design point of this diet was eat like a caveman. Think about the foods that you could forage for back then. It's about getting back to our roots and eating like our Paleolithic ancestors ate, essentially 10,000 years ago. So a modern version of doing this would be keeping your foods whole, simple, and clean. I would call this like an outdoorsman's diet. This is someone who is like eating stuff that they hunted. They're eating good, whole quality foods, fruits, nuts, vegetables, eggs, lean meats, fish, only whole natural foods. No grains, wheat, berries, oats, no peanuts, legumes, no milk or cheese, no refined added sugar, no added salt. So like you can't add salt to your food to season it. Veggies, corn, jicama, peas, white potatoes, processed food. So like they take it a step further and say that humans hadn't really started agriculture at that time. So there's no way that they could have had these foods in their diet because we hadn't found a way to commercialize them in a way. So they're very, if you want to do something like that, it's very, very strict. This is like Liver King. Like I'm not saying that it's bad. I think that there are good aspects of all these things, but there's a bastardization that has happened with a lot of these diets that make them no longer these diets and just a marketing tool to sell you guys a product that is really not that healthy. Just go buy your own product and make it yourself. So much better. The main commonality in themes in these diets is that they focus around eating foods that are whole foods and regional to you, eating what's natural and available to you, specifically based on where you live. Think about it like gas in your car. You know, it's just, you can't put diesel in your car. You got to put gas in your car. If you have a diesel truck, you can't put gas in it. You got to put diesel in it. So our bodies are designed to run on fuels, and there's different types of fuels out there. What I can tell you is this: anyone who thinks that we are supposed to be vegan and they make a bullshit argument that our teeth and this and that, no, they're wrong. And the reason that they're wrong is for multiple reasons. It's the shape of our mouths would indicate that we are not meant to eat plants only. The length of our digestive tract would indicate that we're not supposed to be vegan only. The length of our digestive tract would indicate that we're not supposed to be purely carnivores either. You know, we have the ability to handle a lot of that, but it's not supposed to be all of what we eat. Our digestive tract has prioritized things based on how they break down. Digestion starts in the mouth with saliva that starts to break down with salivary amylase, the carbohydrates that you intake and the simple sugars, so that by the time they get to your stomach and they pump through into the intestines and the small intestines, they're ready to be absorbed into the blood pretty quickly. Now, protein goes down into the stomach and starts to get broken down a little bit more because it's going to take a long, long time. You chew it up as good as you can. You put it down in your stomach, gets broken down. Fat pretty much passes through and starts getting absorbed because there's very little that needs to be done to it a lot of the time. So when we're looking at all of these things, choosing the correct sources of those proteins, fats, and carbs is very, very important to how you feel. Not necessarily how your diet performs, but I will say that eating certain ways will significantly change the way that your weight loss occurs, because certain foods for you specifically will have inflammatory effects, and that will increase your water retention and slow down your weight loss, not necessarily your fat loss. I think that a lot of people also are lazy as fuck. And because they're so lazy, they don't ever get in any exercise. So their body just is like this kind of water bottle, just holds on to everything. You got to get out there and sweat. You got to get out there and breathe and respirate and expel water and drink new water and get your system moving those fluids around. I'm not saying that like there's literally a pump in there that's pumping water around in your body and it just sits still until you exercise and that gets the pump moving. I'm just saying that that forces a turnover of material in your body that you have to replenish. And that is a good thing. All right. I want to pause here on alcohol for a second because two of these diets took alcohol and said, don't have it. Now, what I will tell you is this. I don't think that alcohol is inherently a bad thing. I just think that there are so many people who are incapable of having a good relationship with it. It's the same way as any other substance that provides relief. There are going to be people that abuse it. What I will say with alcohol is just don't drink it because it's a waste of calories. It's seriously a waste of calories. And like, look, regardless of what you think about it, you can take like a 5 milligram edible, which is going to have hardly any calories in it, and it's going to give you a pretty similar feeling, and you're not going to have all the calories. Now, the argument against that from a lot of people is, yeah, but you're going to get the munchies. Maybe you will. So maybe that's why it doesn't work. And maybe you don't have the discipline to do that. So what I would tell people who don't have discipline is people who don't have discipline have to set a higher standard for themselves until they reach a disciplined state. Like, you can't give yourself the benefit of the doubt if you are always in doubt. Like, you can't constantly be doing the opposite of where you're, like, what you need to be doing, and just be like, well, I just think that eventually it's going to figure itself out. No, it's not going to figure itself out. You have to figure it out. And the way that you figure it out is by setting boundaries for yourself and learning to respect those boundaries. And what you'll learn is once you start to respect your own boundaries, you're going to be pretty fucking pissed off when people start disrespecting your boundaries. And it's going to make you change some of the things that you're thinking about and doing. And it's going to change the way that you're living your life some, because you're going to learn that, man, when I respect myself and I put boundaries around myself, I learn that it's really not that hard to stay in the flow. I would say that most people who are struggling with the weight loss stuff are probably struggling with boundary issues as well for themselves in other areas of their life that don't just include food. This isn't me trying to psychoanalyze you. It's patterns. It's just patterns of behavior. So, trying to think of anything else that you would need to know here about those three things. All right. That's pretty much it on that. Now I get to do some riffing in a little bit, or for a little bit, I guess, about other diets. So I want to start with something that is near and dear to my heart, because I personally think that it's one of the better ways to eat, because I trust the food sources on one side more than I trust the food sources on the other side. Okay. Keto, low carb, things like that. What I want to talk about is what it is designed as, why people don't do it right, and how they don't do it right, and how you can actually do this correctly. So first and foremost, anything that says net carbs versus total carbs, or, you know, gross versus net carbs, whatever it is bullshit. Okay? Now, what I will tell you about those products is they're typically much lower calorie than a lot of other products. So if you're just going from a pure calorie standpoint and you don't care about eating processed food all that much, a lot of the low carb bread and tortillas are going to be significantly lower calorie comparatively to the same size of another one, like keto bread or low carb mission tortillas versus a regular one. It's almost half as many calories. Now, what I will tell you is the net carb versus whatever thing carb, you know, the bullshit that they try to push and tell you that this is a low carb food, even though it's got 26 carbs, but it's got 23 grams of sugar, alcohol, and dietary fiber. So the whole theory behind that is that the body doesn't recognize the calories as fast, and it delows the glycemic impact of the carbohydrates, the sugar, alcohols, and the fiber. There is data that shows that happens when you eat it, but you're still taking in 23 carbohydrates. Whether you take them in over an hour or 15 minutes or however long it takes to digest, you're still taking in those carbs. You can't disappear the carbs, okay? Anyone who tries to argue this with me, I will ask them where they go. I don't care if you have a doctorate. Show me where they went. Show me where those carbs went, because you can't add something to something and make it now less. It's not how science works. That's not how math works. You can't add to something and end up with less. You can have different, but you can't have less. So where's the different, or where is the less? That's what I would say to that. Now, what I would also say is, if you are doing this and you're eating more than 5% of your total daily calories as carbohydrates, you're probably doing it wrong. You're probably doing it wrong, because in all reality, this diet should be pretty much plant product that is low carb. So like green vegetables that are low carbohydrate. It should be hardly any fruit and it should be a lot of dairy, a lot of poultry, a lot of fish. Like when I do this, it's a lot of salads with meat. It's a lot of vegetables on the side, broccoli, Brussels sprouts, whatever it is, like finding low carb vegetables or different carb vegetables, and meat and fats on the side. It's a lot of red meat because red meat has more fat content. You still need the calories. And I will tell you that the first few days, it's like, okay, I can do this. Then I go through a big slump. And the reason I go through that big slump, and the reason anybody goes through a big slump who's actually doing a true ketosis diet, is because when you drain your body of the blood sugar that it has, it then taps into the liver and it taps into the pancreas and it taps into all these areas where it's stored around the body. So let's say you have, and I'm just throwing out a flat number here that is not relative to anybody, but the second number that I throw out will. So on average, the human body stores about 400 grams of glucose. That is a true thing. So besides that, we also have glucose stored all over our body. And let's say it's 1,000 grams. So let's say you burn up that 1,000 grams of glucose, you tap into the 400 of reserve, and you've only given yourself 100 calories worth of carbohydrates this day. It now has to find an alternative source of energy. Now it does this throughout the day regardless. Whenever you are in a deficit, it's going to have to use fat for energy, and it's going to prioritize using fat for energy once it runs out of sugar and carbohydrates for energy over muscle, because muscle is more difficult to break down. You might break down your muscle more when you are in a deficit, and it might take longer to repair because you're not getting as much nutrition. That's normal. But at the end of the day, you are working out to preserve as much of that muscle mass as possible while you lose weight, so that when that weight is gone, you don't have a bunch of muscle loss. Because as you lose weight, your body recognizes that you're lighter and it requires less muscle mass to hold up this big frame that you've built for yourself while you were fat. So back to keto, back to low carb, the slump. So the slump essentially is switching over to that keto or ketone body for energy. That's essentially what I read in my nutrition book. Now, the best way I can really describe this is fat burns differently than sugar. Think about it like a blowtorch versus a lamp, like an oil lamp candle. So sugar is like that blowtorch. It's hot, blue flame. It's burning up. It's going real quick. It's more like an oil lamp for fat. So it's a slow burn. It's way more dense. So it takes longer to break down. And the reason it takes longer to break down is because it's more complex of a molecule. So the fat begins to break down, and a byproduct of that is those ketones, which you could pee on these little strips, or you can take a urine test and see them in there and determine your level of ketosis. Now, one thing I will say, for people who have diabetes or liver issues and kidney issues, this can be a problem, because the buildup of these in the system can cause some issues for people. It's similar to the protein buildup with rhabdomyolysis for people who work out really hard and haven't worked out in a long time. It can cause pretty detrimental effects to somebody having ketone buildup. So I would say if you do have diabetes, there's nothing wrong with getting rid of some of those carbs, obviously, but you need to be paying attention to your blood sugar levels. I have worked with diabetic clients, and they were able to stop taking their medications while working with me, not at my direction, but at their choice and their behest, based on the fact that the way that I was recommending that they eat was doing exactly what their medication was doing for them when they were eating poorly. And yeah, did they still have spike days? Did they still have days that, their body was not responding necessarily super well and things weren't working out? Yeah. But at the end of the day, they were still able to lose a significant amount of weight and pretty much self-correct their type 2 just with their diet based on eating less carbohydrates. And the carbohydrates that they ate were more whole food. So generally, when I am eating less carbohydrates, I will do that quite often. And it's not low carb, but what I do is I just don't allow myself to eat processed carbohydrates. And when you do that, you'll realize you eat a lot less carbs. When you get yourself to a point where you say, I'm not going to eat like a whole category of food, it significantly limits your calorie options in certain parts of the world, or maybe when you're in certain locations. So keto in a nutshell, low carb in a nutshell, are designed to lower your calorie intake by reducing your carbohydrates. If you were looking for macronutrient levels, like I would say it's probably like 75% fat in a typical keto type diet. It's like 50 to 75% fat, 5% carbs, and the rest is protein. I have also come across people who can't do stuff like this because when they eat too much protein, they start getting like kidney stones and things. So like, this is why I say not everything is good for everybody, while it can be good for a lot of people. Let's see. So keto is a big one. I know I already kind of railed on vegan and vegetarian diets, but I'm going to get in on it a little bit more here. It's bullshit. It's all bullshit. And the reason that I can't stand it is there are so many fake, processed, disgusting vegetarian and vegan products designed to replicate real meat. They're freaking meat dildos, like just use the real thing. Like just eat the real thing. Don't get seitan bacon. Don't get, tofu turkey. Like just get the real thing. I promise it's better for you. And I understand that people have an ethical problem with eating animals. Then don't buy it from those type of people. I guarantee you can find it and you can do it. If you want to raise chickens and have eggs, there's nothing happening to the bird that is negative. You're not hurting the bird by taking its chickens. So to say, or by taking its eggs, because they're not chickens, they're not inoculated eggs in a way. So I understand the difference between the ethical, moral, whatever problem that people have with the eating animals. And look, there is a reason that we do not eat smarter animals. Like, I think that that's really kind of where we draw the line, is it's a matter of intelligence on the animal's part. It's like, because whales have a lot of meat on them, and I don't know if the meat tastes bad or not, but I mean, at the end of the day, they're mammals in the ocean. So I would imagine they taste more similar to a land mammal than a fish. I'm not saying I want to eat a whale, but, there's a lot of food there. There's a lot of food there that could feed a lot of people, killing a whale. But we don't do it. We consider it wrong because the whale is, I don't know, there's something about it. We liken it to us in a way. We anthropomorphize a whale more than we do a chicken. But we'll eat the chicken. But at the end of the day, what if someone could feel the same way about us? That's all I'm saying. So I understand. But at the end of the day, if you don't like it, you can move to an area where you have the ability to do it yourself. You can find people who live in those areas and you can get your food directly from them. I know that might be a little harder in certain parts of the country, but what I can tell you is if you look, you'll find it. You will find better quality sources. And a lot of the time it's like the grocery stores are kind of like television, propping up these networks, propping up these food companies, propping up these big food, we'll call it. And there are independent sources of getting this stuff. One thing that I wanted to touch on that isn't really quite a diet, but I'm not really a big fan of, and it's mainly I'm not a big fan of, I don't think that the quality of the products that they're actually sending is that good anymore. But a lot of these meal companies like Blue Apron and Only Chef or whatever, or OnlyFans chef thing. I know I said that wrong on purpose. I'm just saying that it's what it there's a lot of these subscription sites out there for food and meals and things like that. And I do not feel that they generally have good quality ingredients or portion sizes, and the calorie and macros on them are generally not that great. I find that they have too much fat in them and not enough protein. And maybe that's because I'm 6'5" and I'm a big guy, and maybe for someone else it would be great. But you know, those calorie content says it's a full meal, but I'm always hungry when I'm done with it, even if I eat all the veggies. So I don't personally think those are a good way to go, especially when I know you could go to the store and buy all this stuff yourself, save some fresh and freeze the rest, and then you have a few different meals, even if you're a single, double, quadruple person. If you're getting the theme of what I'm saying at this point, it might sound that I don't have much faith in the food industry, and I don't have much faith in other people to solve my problems for me. And I don't think these food companies are trying to solve my problem more than they're trying to make their money. I don't think that they have my interest in mind over their interest in mind. I don't think they want me to win as much as I want me to win. And the problem is that I need their product in order to survive. I need food. So what do we do about that? That's really where this comes down to, because it's very easy to point to a problem and say, that's the problem, and have no solution to fix it. And look, the solution that I personally think works best, unfortunately, like cripples everything. Like I think that it should go back to more agrarian type behavior. I think that we've lost everything that it means to be human. Like, we're no longer human. We are a new thing. We live in this new weird society. I'm talking into a microphone and putting it out on the internet, and it's not a human experience anymore. It's something completely different. We are a version of humans, but this is not anything like what our ancestors used to live like and what the design of us is. And the problem is that our change is outpacing our reaction physically, our development. If you want to call it an evolutionary process, you know, as so many people do, you know, that we're not evolving fast enough for our changing society, which means that we are going to be left in the dirt, or we will die. We will become extinct. Anything that has gone extinct was an animal that was unable to adapt or change to its environment or things within its environment. So what I'm telling you is we are doing the same thing as humans to ourselves with our food and with the way that we interact with our ecosystem. And that does truly scare me. And I think that a way to honestly resolve this is for people to stop participating in it, but it takes a group effort. I can't choose to not participate in this by myself, because I've done that. I've tried doing that for so long, and it's the loneliest fucking thing in the whole world to feel like you're out here alone with an idea. It makes you feel crazy, and it's not fun to have ideas that people do not like. I just don't necessarily believe that if we're just talking about human beings, if we're just talking about humanity in general, not America, not a country, not an ideology, just human civilization, people existing all over the world, the cultures that are less developed will outlive the more developed countries if the more developed countries don't find a way to bring the undeveloped parts back in and spread out a little bit more here in America. Not be so centralized, not be so reliant on just a small group of people and companies to come up with all the ideas and products necessary for us to live. And it's hard because we're all just trying to make it right now. So the idea of trying to like overwrite all of the things that have happened over the last couple hundred years in the United States and go into this, and it's not like I'm calling for some sort of revolution. I'm just talking about an idealized utopia in my head where I truly believe people would be happier if they weren't around all of it, all the stuff. I can tell you this. I've never been unhappy when I can't hear the city. So I've lived in a lot of different parts of the United States, or been to a lot of different parts, and I've lived all over California. I've lived in Missouri a couple different times in a couple different places. But what I can tell you is there are parts of the world where you can't hear the world anymore. And that's how it used to always be. You know, you couldn't hear a plane, you couldn't hear a car, couldn't hear other people talking or music playing. All you hear is the leaves and the trees. And, you know, sometimes you can go on a hike and find that pretty easy. And sometimes you have to go on a hike and you got to get pretty far out into the hike before you stop hearing that crap and you stop seeing that stuff. And there's no power lines and you're just kind of out there. You can also hear this when you're at the ocean. On a quiet morning, get out there near the water, and if it's high tide and the waves are crashing real good, you just hear the wind blowing by your ears. You feel the mist on your face. You hear the waves crashing. And for a moment, you are connected to something bigger than yourself. You're connected to this world, the way that our ancestors were. And if you clear your head enough and you meditate in that moment for a little bit and you recognize the power of not hearing anything and how freeing that is, how good that feels for a moment, you'll understand what I'm talking about. And I would just really encourage people to put your peace as a priority, and whatever that means that you have to get that, but not at the expense of others, but that you find time to get to those places where it's quiet. You find time to get to a space that is secluded and away from all of this. You get back connected to the world. You ground yourself if you have to and take your shoes off and dig your feet into the dirt a little bit. That mentality is kind of how I feel about nutrition, how you should be eating, connecting back to the things that are important. I'm not saying that you have to eat like a caveman. I'm not saying you can't have buffalo sauce and ranch dressing or whatever, pizza. But most of what you eat should be good, clean food. You know, you can make pizza yourself and you can try to make it as close to, you know, whole food ingredients as possible. Like I can make my own pizza dough. It's not super hard. But if I want pizza bad enough, I might do it if I set that boundary for myself that I can only eat what I can make. That's a very simple rule to follow that I would suggest to anybody out there that is looking to get started is stick to what you can make. If you can't make bread, don't eat it. If you can make bread, make it and eat it. So if you can't eat bread, what does that leave you with? Well, can you make a hamburger patty? Can you buy a head of lettuce? You know? Maybe you just say, hey, I can make bread, but I'm going to buy this bread because it's easy and cheap and I know it's good. Whatever it is. So like learning to negotiate with yourself, learning to bargain with yourself, setting boundaries with yourself, that's going to be one of the big things. I'm trying to think of any other big diet things. I don't even know if I finished what I was saying about vegetarian and veganism, but what I can tell you is there is no way that eating all those processed foods is better for you than eating whole foods. And the same thing goes for a traditional diet. If you are doing a traditional, I'm just going to cut my calories and watch what I eat, but you're eating a bunch of processed foods, like, it's not good for you. I don't understand why people can't make 2 hours a week to prep some food for the week. It's not that hard. I have made many videos about this explaining how to do it. I've put out tons of information about it on Instagram. And I would really suggest that people do that instead of buying pre-made meals. That's pretty much everything, though, that I had on nutrition today. I've got a lot of other things in the pipeline here that I do want to talk about here in the future. So I was looking at some sleep stuff, stress, social media, muscles, exercise, specifically talking about, these. So these I wanted to address today, but I didn't want to talk about them as a diet because I don't believe they are necessarily a diet, because you don't have to change anything about what you eat, but simply the way that you eat. Intermittent fasting and OMAD, 1 meal a day, as far as diet programs. So I will go into these in more detail, but the reason I don't include them in a diet is because I don't necessarily consider it a diet. You're not restricting food, you're restricting time. And you're restricting the times when you eat the food. And yes, within that, you can make a diet out of it, in which case I will talk about those and what those actually are and what those actually do. But specifically for this, I didn't consider it because it doesn't require a change directly to what you eat. It just requires a change to when you eat and how you eat within those times. But in all reality, how you get those calories doesn't have to change necessarily. The idea is more behind the circadian rhythm disruptions that are caused by eating foods at different times in the day and when your body is more likely to gain the best benefit from the nutrition, the exercise, things like that. So I think there is a lot of really great work being done by Dr. Sachin Panda out of I think it was University of California, San Diego, UCSD, or Scripps, one of them, about circadian rhythms. And he's a great person to look at for that. But yeah, like I was saying, I have a ton of information here. And in all reality, I just want to talk about all kinds of it. So if you have any suggestions, you can comment below on what you would want to hear next. Put something in there. I want to talk about detox and cleanses. I want to talk about memory and brain health. I want to talk about health myths in general. And that's it. But we'll get into it. You guys have a great day. Yeah.
Ways said what I had to say to make it day by day.